Okay, vielen Dank, Bernd. Ich habe in meinen Noten geschrieben, Dekan Naujoks, für die herzliche Begrüßung, auch generell die herzliche Begrüßung die letzten paar Monate. Vielen Dank, dass Sie es doch hierhin gefunden haben, Kolleginnen, Kollegen, Freunde, Studierende. And I'm switching to English now. If there's any of my students here, they're not. They know I do that anyways, all the time. But of course, a lot of thanks also goes out to people who find the time, regardless of their time zone, to log in today. So this is one reason why we're switching to English today. So a note, it was mentioned before, a note on the format tonight, this evening. It's still too bright to say tonight, right? As far as I know, and as was mentioned before, I'm also relatively new to the German university system. Traditionally, the so-called Antrittsvorlesung, or inaugural lecture, was considered the official start of the chair, its teaching and research. So formally also referred to as the Antrittsrede, the inaugural address. It is common for German-speaking universities, but not necessarily everywhere in the world. And was formerly used to serve to subject the new professor to the critique of the faculty and the rest of the university community. Also Wikipedia. As indicated by the denomination of my chair, and my personal belief, theory, discourse, and design are never created in isolation. So either from each other or in a vacuum. Rather, they are interconnected and exert a nonlinear cause and effect influence on one another. So in my opinion, this notion also holds true for history. No, Christoph, we maybe discuss this a little bit further later. I would believe it's widely accepted that the creation and documentation of historical events are influenced by those in power during any given time period, which of course only gives us one point of view. So therefore, Christoph Graf and I believe that presenting the work as an actual discourse in 2 consecutive lectures would be intriguing. I hope for the ones who found themselves here will find that too. So the aim here is to ensure that the work is always viewed in relation to other perspectives rather than in isolation just for myself. Yeah, and similarly, the undertone, the Latin undertones of religious ritualistics, of ingoratio and lustrum. That sounds nice, but we'll ignore that for now. So before I start, just one little thing on the title. We decided to ever so loosely frame the event around the Bestand, that what remains, exists, persists, etc., is something we believe both, and of course everyone in this particular faculty, in their own way, addresses in our/their work. So the title touches on the misled assumption that the existing is a representation of a singular monolithic truth, but instead is a multifaceted reality that stretches over different media, places, and constituents. So you might have noticed the huge asterisk, which hints at the fact that I used a generative AI engine with the prompt, reuse of modernist architecture with point clouds and normal maps, just so you know what you're getting. What I think is interesting here was what is considered by the algorithm as reuse, as modernist, and as architecture, and I hope it at least begins to illuminate the interconnected forces that structure digital technology today and its critical impact on our material lives. So, onwards. Again, as far as I heard, the traditional length of such a lecture is 45 minutes, an academic hour, but in order to keep it more palpable for everyone here, and to get faster to the reception, which I have a hunch that maybe that's the only reason you showed up, I'm gonna try my best to stay at 30. And in general, I'm trying to keep the presentation as comprehensive as possible, but that also means that I'm just showing a kind of mix of research that I have been working on, what I just started working on, and what I plan to focus on for the next couple of years at the Lehrstuhl. Maybe on another asterisk, not that one, but on another side note, I will probably somewhat erratically switch between we and I. I mean, one is I strongly believe in collaborative work, and a lot of the work has been developed interdisciplinary and collaboratively, but also otherwise my ego is just not big enough and cannot handle that. So we, which is in a lot of cases my collaborator Daniele Profeta, and I and multiple other collaborators over the years are particularly interested in the way in which contemporary imaging technologies are placing points as central elements in the construction of our visual language, transforming ever-growing data sets of partial images in three-dimensional machine-readable survey models. So of course many things make us, or probably also the world, uncomfortable about these data sets, from their claim to objectivity, easily transposed from the photographic medium which they build upon, to their seemingly inherent, immovable nature, as if the sheer weight of these unimaginable large sets of information they accumulate renders their content immune for change, right? So to find other ways to relate to these artifacts beyond just looking at them, we focus on their smallest unit, the point, trying to develop a sensibility to connect the mathematical definition, which is what a point cloud really is, as a series of numerical coordinates to their embodied qualities. So from this perspective, we find it highly productive to reflect upon the various degrees of interconnections between abstraction and realism, which underpin how these modes of vision engage with the built environment, but also vice versa. I have like an apology in here. I'm not supposed to apologize, but this part gets a little bit wordy, and then I show cool videos again, so bear with me. This is about the book proposal I'm currently working on, that I will be working on the chair. I focus on the interplay between media, visual culture, and our understanding of physicality and architecture. So I'm particularly interested in how architecture is intertwined with visual devices, and how these shape our perception and impacting the world around us. So this dynamic raises essential questions. Who has the right to be seen or use these tools? Where and when do they have this right? What are the imagined communities and lineages that influences these dynamics? So I'm currently rereading, and of course that's kind of also a lot of visual politics and visual studies scholars, Hannah Arendt's Space of Appearance, where individuals assert both the right to appear, as discussed by Judith Butler, or the right not to be exposed, as Ruha Benjamin would put it, and the right to look, as coined by Nicholas Merzoff. So in Merzoff's book that I think came out last year, which is called White Sight, he highlights that our perception of whiteness involves more than just vision. It is an embodied interaction between people, media, and machines. These machines encompass not only in contemporary technologies like CCTV, optical scanners, but also historical structures, such as plantations, ships, and states, which were considered artificial machines in their respective era. And to echo W.E.B. Du Bois' statement, whiteness is ownership of the earth forever and ever. Amen. So this succinctly encapsulates the lasting impact and privilege associated with the perception and ownership of physical spaces. So one way for me to highlight the tangible aspect of what was previously mentioned, the actual physical manifestation of a point in space through a tool, is to examine the Gunter's chain. This device, also referred to as Gunter's measurements, utilized for surveying distances. It was created in 1620 by Edmund Gunter. And the tool allowed for precise surveying and plotting of land for legal and commercial purposes. But also, Gunther produced a measuring chain composed of first 100 links, which were established as official measures in England, but also other versions subsequently were then used in the British Empire. So the British East India Company used explorers and cartographers and later the Survey of India to expand its territory and gain dominance over the Indian subcontinent eventually. So what is called the Great Trigonometrical Survey, initiated in 1802, aimed to precisely survey the entire region. Okay. Slippery fingers. Among others, it was led by George Everest. So the survey marked borders and measured the heights of Himalayan peaks. And arguably, through its visualization, significantly contributed to India's understanding of self and opened the possibility for the British Empire to expand its territory of power significantly. Now, if we were in a conversation, I'm often confronted with arguments like, this is so long ago, or what has this to do with X? And you can fill in country, profession, project, problem. Just to clarify, in case this is not clear, this is something that still affects all of us today. For example, the New York Times covered this topic in 2019, and I think 2 days ago, the site published an article about the physical and practical impacts of training artificial intelligence in countries like India, Bangladesh, Kenya, and the Philippines. Companies such as Mercedes support the construction of training facilities for workers, so building actual infrastructures there, who manually annotate images of streets in North America and Europe for the future of autonomous driving. So in our work, not that we necessarily are aiming to solve it, but we aim to articulate a methodology to unpack the complexities embedded in these modes of vision, to render them once again active and malleable spaces of intervention and defy monolithic readings of the data sets. So we are increasingly obsessed with the idea of what we call vaporizing scans, so the fleeting, ephemeral quality of it. So not to diminish their material footprint, as if through the surveying process and its ritualistic multiplication of digital impressions gathered on site, photographic fragments to atomized light pulses, right, we could ever relinquish the weight of their physical roots. On the contrary, really, by delaminating their parts, reorganizing their archival structure, and multiplying their frayed edges, our ambition is to extend their material possibilities. We operate with them as volatile devices, as we believe they are, not to remove them from reality, but to broaden their reach of intervention. So today I'm presenting some kind of forms of these agitations, so from material experimentation to site engagement, transdisciplinary collaboration. Shout out to my transdisciplinary collaborators somewhere out there, and teaching. No. So to start, I wanted to look at this project. We worked on this a few years ago. It's a single-family house in Pineto, Rome, which is a neighborhood in Rome that suffered a lot from destruction during the Second World War and is today characterized by a fragmented city fabric built from the ground up. So for our project and site, really, the design was developed as a layered extension of an existing structure. In the process, the means of acquiring the 3D survey of the site and its relative data became integral to the design. We were interested in the possibility of creating an interaction between the visual motion of discovery constructed through surveying practices. So there are image acquisition processes and the urban sonography that comes with this, from the perspective, camera points, view cones, and the site sequence that were instrumentalized to articulate an architectural figure, claiming autonomy as much as engaging with its surroundings. So the proposed design established the street facade acting as much as a disruption as it camouflages itself in the collected data, distorting future surveys and creating its own aesthetic. So what would happen if the next Google car would scan this exact site again. So we became invested in multiplying how the starting survey was able to be activated as a composition device and as a contextual reference. The individual RGB values, if you're familiar with point clouds, essentially a location and an RGB value, are extracted from the survey, were processed following a system of organization prioritizing the topological structure of the scanned artifact. It's 3D mesh, rather than the original material assemblies. This results in what we would call vaporized texture, able to reshuffle existing physical traces towards other material associations. Working in close collaboration with a material development company based in northern Italy, and the individual RGB pixel values were translated in striated bricks composed of a variety of colored grains of sand gathered as a byproduct of other industrial processes and hardened via a natural binder that they experiment with. So the opportunities generated by moving fluidly between multiple representations of the site, from the photographic survey to its point-based visualization and further materialization as material mock-ups, highlight the value of dynamically engaging with these modes of representation to accentuate their potential to problematize ideas of context between physical and digital spaces. So this is a project we did during my time at the Decoloniale residency in Berlin last year. The Decoloniale Berlin is a cultural institution that aimed to implement a memory culture in the city that honors and visualizes anti-colonial, anti-racist resistance fighters and empowers their descendants and related communities today through it. So for everyone who's out there, obviously, big shout out to you. I was only a single actor in this transdisciplinary project that involved, for example, Lulu Jemima, who's a writer, editor, and media consultant from Uganda, Vishidua Nijaradin, who's a visual artist from Namibia, many more. Nabingileb is actually still intensively researching this particular site that I'm going to talk about now. So focusing on this memory culture in the city, uncovering and transforming marginalized narratives in Berlin's public space, the project takes inspiration from an almost forgotten theater piece from the 1930s, titled Sonnenaufgang im Morgenland, or Sunrise in Morningland, and is a nod to everyone who somewhat misguidedly says since 2020 that racism has been so bad for the last 3 years. The play can be seen as both an expression of diasporic identity in the making as well as one of resistance. Resistance against hegemonic stereotypes of race and right-wing backlash against black performers and black cultural forms in late Weimar Germany. When you know, when you don't. So right before Nazi Germany. On a side note, if you're familiar with the Berlin urban conversation and someone who's interested in urban constellations in space, I think it was particularly interesting to find out that the original site of this play that took place in 1930 was around the corner of Hermannplatz in Berlin-Kreuzberg, which is a site where architects, researchers, activists have widely talked about and written about the entanglements of how societal discourse and normative architectural practice inform and reproduce spatial injustices. So today, the original site of the play, Hasenheide 13, presents itself as a series of seemingly disconnected fragments. The layered material traces of what once was a series of ballrooms, a theater, a poultry exhibition, a military hospital in World War I, a Nazi gathering space, a cinema, a 70s dance club called Cheetah, were documented through photographs and 3D scans while there were actually ripping out the walls to renovate it to a gallery space. During the residency last summer, Lulu Jemima worked in collaboration with writer Robbie Aitken, who's a historian of Black Europe and Empire, who's written widely on the development of the Black community in Germany in particular, on the reenactment of this play, or the reimagination of this play. She was using archival research and interviews to juxtapose Black anti-colonial grassroots activism of the 1930s with the contemporary negotiations of identity and activism in modern Berlin today in this in this play that she was working on. It was 2020. So we collaborated with Lulu to develop scenographic projections for the scenic reading, which she titled Greetings from Afar, a backdrop to the performance that would help tie together the biographic reflections of the play with the layered material memory of the site. So while Lulu was stitching together timelines through a writing, the series of still and animated interventions agitated the material trace of this interior space to multiply its interconnections between past and present and really start to act as a storytelling device in and on itself. So in this case, the scans appearing as mixed entity between agitated point clouds, immersive light conditions, varying textual conditions. They're asked to quite literally move to the background and become silent participants. So here again, instead of claiming some sort of holistic dimension of one single site or what remains, the scans are composed as fragmented and partial. They become fertile anchors for multiple narratives to unfold, to extend their connections to the collective memories that can be found here. So in the final act, Lulu constructs a beautiful image of the play that is neither here in her story 2020 or today, nor there, 1930, a play that as it is being read, is also being destroyed, a catalyst act of creation to inspire novel iterations of this act of resistance. The various parts of the survey are rendered as a cycling construct, disappearing as they become visible in a perpetuating act to affirm their presence. No. Don't die on me. This is supposed to play, it's not playing. In general, these are just some images of the play and the installation we've done last summer. So I'm currently working on tying this work to the region of Wuppertal. I'm in conversation with Decolonize Wuppertal, and I'm working with my students in the semester in the E5 design course on the topic of what we, inside of the design course, it's obviously a made-up word, call demonumentalization, or demonument. So this concept operates under the assumption that each generation must reassess its values based on current knowledge, and that it's crucial to determine which aspects of our past, events, places, people, architecture, remain relevant to us today. Monuments continue to play a central role in the current debate about public space and identity, and they're in a lot of cases so big that they are considered architectural pieces, in which perception of shared history, a shared narrative of conquest, exclusion, and celebration of white pioneers and colonizers still persist, as some of these photos would suggest, were hinted on during the Black Lives Matter protests in 2020. In the protests in Germany, Bismarck monuments have become one of the focus points and the focus point of discussion. And we do have many of them here. One of them is in Wuppertal. The Bismarck Tower follows Wilhelm Kreis's design and is therefore somewhat no-frills tower, reminiscent of a single column. The 22-high tower, there you go, is located on the highest point of the heart. You know that better than me, where that is in location to where I'm standing. So 234 meters above sea level on the border between back then independent towns of Barmen and Elberfeld, which for this occasion joined forces to raise the funds for this project. The students and I participated in decolonized Wuppertal city walks, which I would strongly recommend, especially if you're in Wuppertal. And we organized a LiDAR scanning workshop. I'm supposed to play it too, but no. A LiDAR scanning workshop on site. Where we stitched the 17 separate scans that we took on that day together, and we had what I thought a very productive discussion on the aspects of the monument, what was made visible by the scan, and the things that are intrinsically invisible to the machine. So cultural, social undertones of Wilhelm Kreis, for example, or this tower looking over a botanical garden that has, as a typology in and on itself, a lot of colonial history embedded in itself. So finally, I'm not showing any of the architecture projects we are actually working on that in that moment, although I probably could have, because none of my students are here, they would never know. I'm really excited about them. But I'm not sure if my students are ready to show them. But I'm showing some earlier studies that we developed using a variety of techniques and strategies, testing the digital as form work for the physical and vice versa. And that was it. Thank you.